Good morning and welcome to our Zoom worship service. We always preface our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and our church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. Those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, the Shitshunsh, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you're joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide. Take just a moment to pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. And now we will join our voices together for our words of welcome, our unison chalice lighting, and our sung affirmation. Wherever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. If you have a candle or a chalice to light, I'd invite you to do it now.
We are the Thompsons. I'm Susan. This is Paul. And this is Michael.
In the light of truth and warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land by every tongue.
So this morning's service is meant to be an introduction to Unitarian Universalism. Why do we have that crazy name? Why do we light a chalice? What are the values and beliefs and behaviors at the heart of our shared community? I also threw in what I think are the best Unitarian Universalist jokes because it makes it more fun if we get to laugh a little bit. I feel like I need to include some sort of a warning. I'm a bit of a history geek, so this service may be a little bit heavy on who we were and a little lighter on who we are, but who we are is always in the process of becoming. It's moving, changing, evolving, transforming. So I hope that this will give you a basic grounding in our Unitarian Universalist identity. We are what we do, what we believe, how we want to be in the world. And I invite you now to join in our opening hymn, "This Morning Has Come."
Joy and sing a song of gladness.
meditation this morning begins with words by Theodore Parker and then moves into sort of a riff that I wrote, a meditation that I wrote inspired by Parker's words. The hours, a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple, all space, its shrine, good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual, works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. In the day and in the night, wherever we go, whatever we do, may each of us know ourselves to be enveloped in warmth and love, beautiful and blessed. May we see holiness and goodness everywhere. Grateful for the privilege of being alive, always willing to pause in reverence and awe, and celebrate the beauty that surrounds us. In our times of joy, when love comes easy, and in our times of pain and loss, when love comes hard, may we trust in the resilience and deep wisdom of the human spirit. We strive to act for love's sake, cultivate compassion in our lives and our relationships, keep hope alive, no matter the circumstances, and courageously embrace and respond to life. We know ourselves to be part of a great dance that spans more time and space than we can comprehend, each of us finding our own way, one moment at a time, one breath at a time. In silence, let us rest in the love and peace that surrounds us and dwells within us as well. Readings this morning come from elevator speeches. These are short explanations of what Unitarian Universalism is, created by people, and the idea is supposed to be to the point enough, concise enough that you can recite them in the elevator between the 10th floor and the ground floor if somebody asks you what Unitarian Universalism is. And go ahead.
Our denomination is unique because every Unitarian Universalist has the right to develop a personal philosophy of life without being told what to believe. We can learn from all philosophies and religions, and also from science and the arts. We explore important life issues in a caring community, united by shared values rather than by shared theological opinions. And no matter what we do believe about theology or philosophy, we try to live a good life and leave the world better than we found it. It's from Reverend Chris Schreiner.
Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal, not a creedal faith. That means that although we may believe differently, we come together to search, grow, serve, and minister. Francis David said it best, we need not think alike, love alike. Both Unitarianism and Universalism sprang from liberal Christianity. Unitarianism speaks to the nature of God as one, holy, transcendent, immanent, whole, mystery. Universalism speaks to the nature of our relationships with the divine, with ourselves, with each other, with the planet which we call home. This is by Michelle Beatty.
The Unitarian side of our family tree tells us that there is only one God, one spirit of life, one power of love. The Universalist side tells us that God is a loving God, condemning none of us and valuing the spark of divinity that is in every human being. So Unitarian Universalism stands for one God, no one left behind. And that's from Reverend William Sinkford, who was a former UUA president.
It's a blessing you were born. It matters what you do with your life. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. You do not have to do it alone. It's from Leila Ibrahim.
Unitarian Universalism is a big faith, and we have a big message. There is one spirit of life that moves within and between us and calls us to care for each other. Our faith celebrates the beauty, diversity, and goodness of all creation, all life. We believe in love and compassion for all, and in using our best learning to make the best choices we can. That was Natalie Fenimore.
Our faith is not interested in saving your soul. We're here to help you unfold the awesome soul you already have. By Andrea Lerner.
So, Unitarian Universalism, it's a very long name. It's a very long name. This is one of the challenges of elevator speeches because you have to spit out the name, and that takes up at least a floor or two. So that's why we frequently shorten it to UU. The theological concepts from which we take our name can actually be traced back to early Christianity, and they were initially meant more or less as insults. The first person to be accused of the heresy of universalism, we think, because record keeping wasn't great back then, was a man named Origen who lived in the 2nd century. He believed and taught that Jesus' death on the cross liberated all humanity from original sin. The first Unitarian heretic was named Arius, and sometimes Unitarianism is called Arianism. He incited riots by insisting on pointing out that there's no scriptural basis for the Trinity. He embraced a low Christology, which means he believed and taught that Jesus was human and we're meant to emulate Jesus as best we can, as opposed to deciding that Jesus was divine and magical, and if we claim him as our savior, he'll just take care of the rest. The early days of Christianity had a lot of debate, and then they would vote on what was going to be accepted into canon or not. Long story or short, the proponents of both Unitarianism and Universalism lost every time. So it could have something to do with how useful fear of hell can be in controlling and manipulating people, or it could also have something to do with how hard it is to actually model our lives on a radically compassionate, radically inclusive, nonviolent zealot. These theological ideas, so because they lost the votes, went underground for centuries, and they only emerged post-Reformation, most notably in the work of theologian and medical doctor Michael Servetus, author of The Errors of the Trinity and Our First Martyr, who was burned at the stake by Calvin in Geneva. Now you'll remember that post-Reformation there were a lot of civil wars fought over religion. In the midst of the chaos, there was exactly one Unitarian king. His name was John Sigismund Zapolya, and he was king of Hungary and Transylvania. Under his rule, people were allowed to choose their religion. He signed into law, actually, the first first edict that allowed religious freedom. It's called the Edict of Torda. So he signed it in 1568. And the language in it actually is reflected in our own Bill of Rights. For the most part, though, our theological ancestors were a little too radical for Europe. So they came here to North America, roots down in the fertile soil of this continent. You probably know about the Puritans who came to the New World from England, got blown off course and landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where they started the Massachusetts Bay Colony. You might not know is that many of the churches the Pilgrims founded are now Unitarian Universalist, because just as in the early days of Christianity, those communities voted on their theology. And this time, occasionally, the Unitarians or the Universalists actually won. Unitarians here in the US in early 1800s argued in favor of salvation by character. In other words, they believed that human beings should model their lives on Jesus's teaching. Universalists, meanwhile, taught universal salvation. They believed a loving God would never damn anyone to hell. There's an easy way to remember which is which. Universalists broke from the Calvinist Puritans because they believed God was too good to damn people, and the Unitarians broke from the Calvinist Puritans because they believed they were too good to be damned. Unitarians and the Universalists maintained separate organizations until 1961. They merged largely for financial reasons and formed one faith, Unitarian Universalism. So there you have it. That's how we wound up with this long name. Now you might be asking at this point, modern Unitarian Universalists still embrace these theological ideas? Is this still a Christian denomination? And the answer is not exactly. People who identify as Christian are a distinct minority in our congregations. How did that happen? I blame the Transcendentalists. Transcendentalists, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Theodore Parker, and their contemporaries are some of our favorite ancestors. By breaking out of the exclusively Christian framework and embracing the divine as expressed in nature, literature, and every person, the Transcendentalists expanded our horizons and paved the way for theological diversity. Do you hear the one about the latest Unitarian miracle? Someone saw Emerson's face in a corn tortilla. A new faith called humanism came along at the beginning of the 20th century, and this was a faith that rejected not just creeds and Christianity, but the need for a deity in the first place. It caught on like wildfire among the Unitarians and to a lesser extent with the Universalists. As humanism became more popular, there was a certain amount of conflict and controversy. For a little while, the Unitarians actually split into two conferences. In the East, the establishment began to call themselves Unitarian Christians, while Western Unitarian Conference was dominated by humanists. Eventually, things simmered down, and to say you're Unitarian came to mean, I believe there's no more than one God. Most Universalists during these years were still Christian. As humanism spread, a few liberal Universalists also began to encourage the evolution of their faith. They issued a call to a wider universalism, sought wisdom from all the world religions. And this was a lot easier to do, to seek that wisdom, because the scriptures of the world religions were being translated into English and published widely. A favorite joke, who do Unitarian Universalists pray to? To whom it may concern. After World War II, there was a decline in church attendance across the board, and some strands of humanism began to develop a distinct anti-clerical, anti-authoritarian, anti-religious flavor. People who wanted communities that felt as little like traditional church as possible found their needs were able to be met in small, lay-led fellowships sprung up across the country. And actually, this congregation was originally founded as a fellowship. So, our roots are Christian, but then we had the Transcendentalists, and then the humanists, and then the fellowship movement. And then last but not least, we saw a huge influx of pagans starting in the mid-70s. When the humanists came along, we figured that we all believed in no more than one God. The pagans arrived, we all agreed we could believe in one God more or less. Always when new ideas or theologies or practices come along, we stretched, we made room. It wasn't and isn't always comfortable. Sometimes things get a little complicated. So luckily, one of our principles is that we rely on the democratic process. We still debate and then vote on things. So the Christians have the Bible, the Jews, the Torah, the Muslims, the Quran. Unitarian Universalists have Robert's Rules of Order. But this means we've gotten good at developing consensus and finding common ground. We don't have one central truth, one central story. Remember, Ginger said we're covenantal rather than creedal. That means we don't all believe the same thing, but we agree on how people should treat one another. We don't think alike. We love alike. And we are continually working to love more expansively. Many Unitarian Universalists were active in the civil rights movement. There was a large contingent at the march in Selma. It was organized after the death of James Reeb, a white Unitarian Universalist minister, in 1965. Some credit the march in Selma and the national outrage at Reeb's murder and the murder of Viola Liuzzo, who was another white UU, with turning the tide and leading Congress to finally pass civil rights legislation. Internal power struggles around racial issues took their toll on the denomination in the late 60s, but we've continued to do the challenging work of racial justice. Imperfectly for sure. We've kept at it. We've also remained committed to gender justice, gay liberation, economic justice, and environmental justice. Our values are unabashedly progressive, which means that the polarization of the political landscape nationally has shifted the makeup of our congregations. When I was growing up, and like Ginger, I grew up Unitarian Universalist, Republicans and Democrats coexisted quite happily and peacefully in my Unitarian Universalist community. These days, it's a lot harder, I think both in our congregations and also out in the wider world. I don't know what to do about the so-called culture wars and the intense partisanship in our country. I do know that it doesn't serve the common good, and I'm continually hoping for a resurgence of civil discourse, compromise, and cooperation. Did you hear the one about the conservative Christian who greeted St. Peter warmly at the pearly gates and asked, "Do I get to go in and meet my maker now?" St. Peter responded, "I'd wait a while. She's black, gay, a little ticked off with you at the moment." So, who are we now? A survey of Unitarian Universalists across the country revealed that our most sacred ritual, one practiced in every congregation, is coffee hour. Coffee, 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 praise the strength of coffee. When we're late to congregate, we come in time for thee. Don't worry, we don't discriminate against those of you who don't believe in coffee. We also serve tea and cold drinks and even hot chocolate. And if you have been missing in-person coffee hour, I'll remind you again of the reception this afternoon at PCEI from noon to 1. The second most common ritual in our congregations is the lighting of the chalice. The flaming chalice was initially used by the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee during World War II. We were in Europe, attempting to help refugees of all faiths escape. And they wanted to be recognized as people who were there to help. So they chose the eternal flame rather than a cross or a Star of David or some other more narrowly defined religious symbol. So this is what we're trying to hold in this space, in this community. The values, the flame, the spirit that's somehow at the intersection of all those different religious and spiritual paths: Christian, pagan, atheist, agnostic, theist, Buddhist, Jewish, eclectic, name it. Say if you put 3 Unitarian Universalists in a room, you'll have at least 4 opinions on just about any subject. And both individually and collectively, we acknowledge that any answers we come to are going to be at best SAN, somewhat adequate for now. But why bother? Because it's the questions that matter, not the answer each individual finds palatable at a given moment. Lenny Bruce once joked that he knew he'd said something really outrageous when Unitarian Universalists got so mad they burned a question mark on his lawn. So that's what we believe. What we do is build beloved community. We worship, we celebrate or mourn life's moments of transition, care for each other in times of joy and of need, work for justice and peace in the world. We abide by a covenant of right relations which sets boundaries around how we behave other than what we think. We try not to take ourselves or our faith too seriously, but we don't take it too lightly either. In a world where religious and political divides have led to so much pain, destruction, war, and oppression, our saving message of tolerance, diversity, and unconditional love still sings. As my colleague Marge Kite put it in her sermon, The Uncommon Denomination, our world has never more deeply needed a model of community. Differences are seen to enrich rather than to threaten. A way of faith that engages what it does not know. A dauntless spirit that links fresh words to gorgeous melodies, hope and joy. Being a part of building that model, living that model, is invigorating and challenging, nourishing and healing, meaningful and rewarding work. While our spiritual paths are different, we are united by love for the world and for one another. Together, we are on a journey for justice, true equality, and peace. And I can imagine no finer traveling companions. So be it, and so may it be. Let's sing again together, Fire of Commitment.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. fulfillment and our future can begin.
Closing reading is by Douglas Taylor. Alone in the world, I was beset with frustration and anger at the world around me. So much injustice and hatred, so little peace and freedom. I longed to make a difference, but my actions seemed insignificant, and my words were drowned out.
Then I came into community, a religious community of hope and love. Here I found support and energy, vision and power, the authority of shared witness, and together we changed the world. Alone in the world, I was beset by sorrow and hurt in my life. So much loss and emptiness, so little hope and understanding. My tears brought little relief, and my burdens grew too heavy.
Then I came into community, a religious community of hope and love. Here I found support and compassion, wisdom and grace, and the power of shared experience, and together we made life sweeter. Alone in the world, I was beset by confusion and emptiness in my soul, so much busyness and pettiness, so little depth or connection.
I came into community, religious community of hope and love. Here I found wisdom and encouragement, depth and diversity, and the power of companions on the journey. Together, we gave my life meaning. Let's sing together our sung benediction, There is a Love. Now we say the words to embody flame. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again.